Big Safety Podcast with Vance and Bart.
It's a trap. There's no comfort fitting in a fake safety that no one believes in. Man, that was dope! What are you, like a third-degree black belt?
The blackness of my belt is like the inside of a coffin on a moonless night.
That's pretty black, man.
It is a black art. And I, Haru, am the blackest of the black. Or actually, the great white black art. Blackest master.
So, on the topic of action films being propaganda, do you believe Beverly Hills Ninja to be government-funded propaganda?
No, I don't think that government promotes would promote a racist film like that, I think they're the answer to all racism.
Do you mean promote a racial film like that? Because Beverly Hills Ninja is not racist. Like, just because it has the doesn't mean it's racist.
Okay.
Right? Or is that racist?
I have no idea. I don't understand racism anymore. Maybe because there is no. It's become so overused. Things that aren't important, just to cover up what is important. That I can't even figure out what is racist and what isn't anymore.
Well, I mean, obviously some people use racism and call people racist that aren't, like the same way people call people Nazis that aren't. But, some stuff is legitimately racist because they're discriminating or believe someone to be lesser than because of the race that they are. So just because people use it online or something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But let's take, for example, the Asian hate crime that just took place.
Are you talking about the crime in Atlanta, or are we talking about
the massage parlor place? Okay. Or places, right?
Yeah, so we need to remember that I believe 3 of those women weren't of Asian descent that perished. They were all women. I mean, that holds more water. Really? Maybe it's just he doesn't like ladies. I don't know. But yeah. So this was clearly a crime against sex workers, or that were working maybe under the radar for certain reasons.
Should we set the story up for folks here? Because if those of you listening are not big on watching the news, especially news that might not have made it to you, right. It might be worth breaking this down. So there was and correct me if I'm wrong here, there was a gentleman who was going to these massage parlors somewhat frequently and getting happy endings. So sexual services at these places, which certainly are not legal, but they seem to have been taking place under the table, or I guess in this case, over the table. But then he went in being, and this is where it kind of falls apart a little bit. It seems like the few different narratives that I've seen have all kind of averaged out to him having some sort of issue with his own guilt and sex addiction and blaming that on these women, and went into the reports are multiple locations, I believe, right? He went into multiple locations and shot these women who were, I guess, causing him to act on whatever this addiction is. We're not following his logic there, but I think that's the long and the short of it, right?
Yeah, he couldn't resist the temptation, and he wanted to get rid of the temptation. The temptation being sex workers performing sex acts for money. The sad fact is sex work is illegal in Georgia. So for those on the right listening who, they shouldn't be doing this. Sex work is wrong. It's already illegal. We tried that, right? The fact that they were, a lot of them were Asian, I mean, that just goes with the type of place that he frequented, were ones that had mostly Asian people in them. It's not like the only sex workers out there are Asians, but this man frequented those kind, obviously, right? Because that was his temptation. But they weren't all Asian descent, right? So we could speak about race, but it doesn't really seem relevant. I think everybody else is doing that, and it just doesn't seem like that would get to the core of the problem, or to, help resolve some of this so it doesn't happen to somebody in the future. And I think that's what we really should be focused on, right? Is trying to end these senseless acts of violence that bring so much, hurt, anger, sadness to innocent people. And you're not going to get rid of sex work. The prostitution is going to happen. It will forever, as long as humans are around, right? It's been around for a long time. It's been illegal for a long time. But, when we had Backpage, even though it wasn't legal, it was a safe place for women in that industry to communicate with each other, to black flag customers who were violent, who they felt were dangerous, communicate that to each other. And of course that got pulled off, right? The government went after that and shut that down. And, now these women who were on Backpage, who could communicate those things, are left blind. You can say, well, they shouldn't be doing sex work, but they are. Women will do sex work. And men will too. It's not just women. I don't know why I said that. I guess because when I think of a sex worker, I think of a woman, because that's what I'm into, is women. But men do it too, right? But these red flags, whether these women would have seen it in this man or not, I don't know. But it would have been one level of communication that if they did, they could have at least alerted each other to watch out for them. Maybe it would have saved a life or two. Who knows? But then we also can look at the fact that it's illegal. You can't have the proper kind of security for that industry there because it would draw attention to something that they're trying not to draw attention to, right? So why would you need that kind of security you get a shoulder rub, right? It's everything that I can think of that could have helped the situation. And it has to do with the way my mind works too. I'm sure there's something else we could debate too, but it stems from the fact that it was illegal. I mean, you're going to have crazy people no matter what, whether sex work is illegal or legal. You're going to have sex workers, whether it's illegal or legal. So I think we have a better chance of stopping this if it is legal. For one, say the police are somebody's gone to two. What do you call a legal whorehouse? Whorehouse is probably not the proper word.
Brothel?
Brothel, right. Okay. If somebody's gone to two brothels and shot up the ladies in them, if you can go onto Google Maps and, brothels nearby, like the cops know where to go, right? To protect the ladies.
I honestly don't see anyone getting to the second brothel. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How do you cross town after shooting up a place unless that place is mired in illegal activity?
Right. Yeah, I mean, another layer right there. What I see is, what are the objections that I typically hear from we should legalize sex work? Well, everybody would, STDs would be spread, rampant, or
well, luckily we have enough countries participating in that kind of system to give us the data that shows that that's not a problem.
Yeah, but it's still something I hear,
Sure, yeah.
And the moral degradation of society around that kind of thing, but that doesn't hold water either because it's already going on, right? Anyway, so
well, I guess with that argument, it could possibly be not that it's already going on. It could be similar to the gun control debate, right? Of not that the illegal ones are still going to happen, yes, but it puts a deterring factor in place. So maybe it would still happen illegally, but it would happen less.
Okay. I don't see how that protects anybody. So, I mean, like, I could see that argument, like, okay, it happens less. All right, so what do you get out of that? What benefit to society comes from people who would frequent a prostitute, right? Mm-hmm. Being cut off from that release?
I think the question is a bit more philosophical, right? Like, if you believe that is inherently an evil act, and let's not even say that. Let's say that you believe it to be an immoral act, and you want to put safeguards in place so someone can be reminded that they should not do that, then I think that person would believe the world is better off with fewer people having legal temptation to do so.
And so then we have to weigh the moral high ground that they're supposedly on with the act that they're willing to do to enforce their moral. So they're willing to use violence against a peaceful person voluntarily interacting with another peaceful person with potentially enslaving that person for a certain amount of time to enforce this, right? And that's more morally better than letting them do it and then explaining to them why they shouldn't be doing that. So it just kind of seems hard to, when you really think about what you're saying by making something illegal, it really makes it hard to stay on that moral high ground, right?
It seems more like a trolley problem to some degree. The idea of these trade-offs that don't, well, some folks believe that they have answers, some folks don't, and then the people who believe that they have answers believe different answers. But I think if you trade one answer, which is making it legal, and therefore the world is less moral, for the other answer, which is it is illegal, and now folks are protected from that by threat of violence, I think it's pretty easy to do the math, assuming that not every person is going to be subjected to that violence, merely the threat of the violence. So when people look at a police state or the state and how they enforce things, it's generally under threat of violence for the sake of the good or good. The threat of violence for the sake of the greater good.
Okay. All right. So you still have to, if somebody's gonna argue that it should be illegal for the greater good, right? You still have to provide evidence that it is a greater good, right?
Right, because their argument simplified is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's still progress, but they admittedly won't endorse the violence, but they will endorse making the act illegal at the cost of the threat of violence. So
Right.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now, your point stands, though. How do we objectively say that it is immoral to do such a thing?
So I don't believe that. I believe that there's things that are going to be immoral or shouldn't be done. Things that I feel are wrong, but they're not. If they don't hurt another person, they're not things that I would use the state to enforce, violence to enforce, right? I may go out and I may speak to people, say, hey, I think that this is wrong. I don't think you should do this. And I would make make a case for it and try to convince people, that to see the light, right? Or whatever. And that works great. There's a lot of things that have become norms in our society that have come about like that, right? But just standing in line at the gas station, there's no law that you have to stand in line. You know, you could, and we've all had it. Somebody just jumped in front, right? It annoys us. But it's not something you can call the cops on or goes to jail for or anything. But he's shunned. Society looks down on it. He's not going to get any sympathy if he, shuts his hand in the door or something. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's, if you don't believe that prostitution should be happening, I don't feel like putting these women in more danger because you want to make it illegal. Because, I mean, let's talk about the sex worker themselves, right? They're in this black market because they've been pushed to it, right? And it's more dangerous. It's already kind of a dangerous job. You're getting very intimate with a stranger, right? But then if you make it more back room, kind of deal, it's a lot more dangerous for these women. And we're not talking about women, for the most part, we're not talking about women who have, a lot of going for them in life. We're talking about people who are down on their luck, people who have been wronged or made really bad choices or gotten out of prison, and something they went to prison for made it really hard to get a job. All kinds of reasons why people go into prostitution. They just like it. There are people that do that, right? But for the most part, it's people who are really had a rough run who get into it, right? I don't see how making it more dangerous for these people is good. In fact, like, if you want somebody to not be a prostitute anymore, right? It being legal would probably make that easier, because they wouldn't have a record, going to prison for prostitution, right? So when they got, when they go to get a better job after they've studied or whatever with the money they're making from prostituting, they could get a better job. They could move up in society.
So follow me down with this for a second. I feel like what this guy did is kind of just a natural outgrowth of the logical path of thinking around making prostitution illegal, right? So think about what we were talking about. So if the idea is that prostitution is immoral and we believe that it is worth making it illegal under the threat of violence for the sake of the greater good, is that not the same argument as the argument he essentially made but took to its logical conclusion, which is if someone is practicing something that isn't for the greater good and is in fact immoral, that threat of violence should then be executed upon that person, and he merely executed the same violence that we had promised through the law.
Yeah, I mean, he took it to its extreme conclusion.
Certainly, extreme, but that's where it leads, right?
Right. It all ends up there if you don't submit at a lower level, right? So the prostitute doesn't submit to being detained or arrested or what, it always ends with her his death, right? That's the violence. So yeah, he just took it straight to its end result right off the bat. The difference is he doesn't have the monopoly on violence. He isn't protected under that whatever that make-believe protection that we give to so-called, authority, the so-called authority of government that we have, right? But we also need to remind ourselves that these women were hurt. Their families were hurt. The state is going to prosecute this man. And these families aren't going to get anything out of it. He's not going to be responsible for trying to make restitution or any of these things. These women's families, these women's lives are cut short, and they will get nothing for it.
Is that
But
certain? Is there not
state-
not a possibility of a civil suit here?
I guess there probably could be, but that's not what the state is going to prosecute him for, right?
True.
The state's going to put him in prison and make sure that he can't afford to do anything for him, right? Or maybe his family will be able to, right? But they could civil sue. But for the most part, what they'll do is they'll put him in prison. He'll have all kinds of, he'll lose everything, right? Back to the banks or whatever, right? And the families won't get anything, because our justice system isn't designed to help the victims of the crimes. It's to punish, right? It's a terrible idea, but I think we really should get back to the idea of whoever is the victim of whatever crime, that's to get them back to whole or as close to whole as they can get should be our goal with anything, right?
Right.
But it's not even thought about in most crimes by anybody involved. The defense, the prosecutor, the judge, not even considered. So if one of the family members or a couple of the family members deem that this person's family has got something that they could get, right, to try to get some sort of restitution, and they take it upon themselves to have civil suit or whatever, like maybe they'll get something, but not before the state gets what it wants, right?
And do you think that they would be led to do that, or maybe even have the resources to bring about such a suit? Because I have to imagine that any attorney that thinks that they would win it might take it, just pending that they get a piece of the pie when it goes through. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I can't imagine that they would have the resources to sue, right? Like if this is a family that has largely relied on, I'm being incredibly presumptuous here,
Right.
but just on average, what you said is very likely that folks who are in this position, whether that be, they like it or whatever it is, the more likely scenario is that they are in a pretty rough spot, and this was the majority of their income, maybe even for their network or family or chosen unit. So now that income source is gone, what will the family do to try and sue for damages?
Yeah, and the odds of being able to squeeze any blood out of that turnip, or I don't know how old the kid was. I like a lot of our listeners probably. I don't really watch the news, but I do hear like little snippets from podcasts and things like that, YouTube videos and whatever, right? I hear a little bit here, a little bit there. I have my father and mother-in-law living with me at the moment, and I hear some of the things that they talk about. So I understand he was a young man. They caught him in Woodstock, I think. Woodstock, Georgia. I know you've been there. We've both been there.
Have been there.
It's not a it's not a rough area. Most of Woodstock is really nice. And even the rough parts of Woodstock, what they would consider rough, is just mostly Hispanic, people, construction workers. They're just lower income, but most of them tend to be like family households, and it's not like a bunch of gangsters walking around or anything like that. It's just a lower income family. So that's about it, right? So these massage parlors, right? They're servicing customers in every class, right? The upper class, middle class, lower class. They're providing a service that is obviously desired.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about the percentage of their income, is it frequent shoppers who have a higher income, or is it a larger quantity of folks coming that have the lower income, right? Like, if you, I don't know the going rate for that type of massage in Woodstock, Georgia, but I have to imagine that it's not, a negligible amount.
Yeah. I don't know personally. Not that I would feel any shame if I had done that, but I haven't. And if I had, I would definitely tell you what I paid for it. Would not be ashamed of it at all.
Is this more him lashing out at pricing? Did he go to 3 different places and the prices just kept getting worse? He's like, false advertising, or worse yet. And maybe these are all things that would have been revealed if we had trudged through the swamps of sludge that folks call news. But, is it that he was trying to get that from these people and they didn't because he was strange or a creep or something, and he's lashing out? Like, did he go from one to the other trying to get this because they don't provide those services? Like, I feel like we haven't really even addressed that at all, but is that possible?
I believe, I guess it could be, but I believe what it was, from what I've heard, is they were all those kind of places. Maybe they're all ones that he's been to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to sanity check there. So
he wanted this temptation gone, is the way I understand it. But obviously, this is a mentally disturbed person. his guilt is so much so for getting a hand job, but not for murdering somebody for giving a hand job. Like,
Baby out with the bathwater.
he didn't think this through in any logical way, because he could obviously say, I'm the criminal too. The logical path you took was the ends are violence against the prostitute, but the ends are also violence against the what do they call him, John, or the patron of the said prostitute. So
Entrepreneur.
he could have just turned the gun on himself and it would have been the same thing, right? It would have been the logical conclusion to the violence that we promise you if you go to a prostitute.
Well, and many have taken that same path. We just don't read about it or hear about it on the news, because that internal story that's playing out that leads him to that conclusion is not newsworthy.
Right. And it's hard to scream racism when you shot yourself.
I forgot. Yes, race.
So
the reason this is all happening.
Right.
That's why he did it.
Right. So I think what we've uncovered here is we spoke about what actually happened there. And let's try to come up with a solution to make this less likely to happen, right? And keep these women safe. What we did not do was what our media, sensational media, wants us to do. Get sidetracked on something that gets us yelling at each other, right? So,
like, is Beverly Hills Ninja the best movie of all time?
right. Think about how passionate that debate would be.
Like, the right answer being